Hi, it's Stephen Orr, and it's fall, and of course we're talking about pumpkins and squash and what the difference is. And there really is no difference. These are all squashes, but this is a pumpkin because it's shaped like a pumpkin. So that's really the main difference. We've divided them into these two groups just by how they look, but actually winter squash are all known for these hard skins that help preserve them all through the fall months, all through winter, and sometimes even to spring, depending on the variety. All the different types of squash are edible. It's just the amount of flesh that's inside the squash that makes it useful. So like for instance, this little guy, as beautiful as he is really more decorative because there's not that much flesh inside. You could eat this little pumpkin. And this guy, although edible, it's not in any way poisonous or inedible. It just won't be that tasty. It's really just grown for its kind of funny exterior. So one of the best things about these squashes is that they are readily available. So if you don't want to grow them, you can find them in the fall at different farmers markets or other things. But if you are interested in growing squash and pumpkins, you do need some space. If you have a small back terrace, this won't be right for you. They need at least 4 to 6 feet to spread out, especially the pumpkins. They really can sprawl. The best way you grow them is from seed. You don't need to start the seeds indoors. Some vegetables, you know, like tomatoes, you need to start several weeks, if not six weeks before the last frost date. What you do with pumpkin and squash seeds is they need warm soil, so you wait about 2 to 3 weeks after the last frost date, and don't rush, because if you put these seeds in the ground, they're just going to rot. The seeds are basically what you'll recognize from, if you eat pumpkin seeds, they're pumpkin seeds. You can put like 4 to 6 seeds in a hill, and you make that about a foot around and mound it up a few inches, and that helps with drainage so that the seeds don't rot, and it also just helps the plants have a lot of good soil to grow in. They'll sprawl out from that. As they emerge, you would thin out every other seedling so that you have 2 or 3 plants on one hill, and you want to, as I said, leave a lot of room. So could be 6 feet between the hills, depending on how much you want to grow. But you'll have a lot of squash with even one hill, so if you want to start off like that, that's a great way to do it. And as the plants grow, they'll just kind of sprawl along the ground. You can put some straw underneath the pumpkins and the squashes as they grow, because as you can see at a farmer's market, sometimes the bottom of the pumpkins get a little rough looking because they're sitting on the ground, and if it gets wet, they'll kind of discolor or disfigure the pumpkin. So once you have your plants and you have your selected plants all thinned out, you really do need to keep a consistent watering. The reason this plant is this large is it's mainly full of water. So pumpkins and squash take a fair amount of water. It should be consistent so that they are not kind of in a drought situation and then flooded. The weather obviously will have something to do with that, but when you're adding water, just make sure that you keep it pretty consistent. The plants are fairly easy to care for. If you're worried about size, you can plant an acorn squash that might have a bushier type. Some of the hybrids are grown to be bushier rather than these long sprawling vines that you might see in a pumpkin patch. Pumpkins and squash do have several pests that plague them. You want to keep a close eye on them, and anytime you see the leaves getting a little bit eaten, or you see holes in the leaves or yellowing leaves, you want to investigate and see what kind of bugs are in there. The two main ones are cucumber beetles, because cucumbers are indeed related to pumpkins and squash, and also squash bugs. And both of these you can control, but you need to really look and make sure that you don't have an infestation. Once they really get rolling, these pests can take over your plants and really decimate them. So keep an eye out for those. Look for natural solutions to control that. Since this is an edible plant, I wouldn't spray a lot of harsh chemical fertilizers around what you're going to eat. If you do think you have some pests bothering your pumpkin patch, one easy way to handle that is for the squash bugs, you can put down a small board next to the plants, and the bugs will crawl under there, and you can find them there and kill them in the morning. Also, you can just go out and, like you would a Japanese beetle, and pick off any beetles you see and kill those. So you just kind of constantly need to be checking on that. Another way with something like a cucumber beetle is to use a yellow sticky trap, and that will work sometimes as well. So also, if you're new to it, you might want to try a pest-resistant variety like a butternut or an acorn squash. Those are bred to be a little more pest-resistant. So those will help you kind of fend off some of these bugs that are trying to eat the plants before you get a chance to. So it's really easy to know when to harvest these squash and pumpkins because they'll kind of reach the size that you expect them to be. The butternut squash, this is a large butternut squash, but anything smaller than this would be a nice size for a butternut squash. A pumpkin, this is a nice size for a cheese pumpkin, but you know, pumpkins can get giant. So just when you're buying them, look for pumpkins and squash that have unblemished skin, that don't have any cuts or bruises, because any kind of bruise or cut on that plant will start rotting on the inside. At home, it's kind of the same. You'll grow them till they seem like the right size. The skin should feel nice and solid. They should feel heavy because they're really ripe and full of moisture. And also you should cut off the stem, don't tear it. Obviously this is a big thick stem, so even on the small varieties, just snip those off and then store the pumpkins in a cool place that's really dry so they won't rot. So if you're like me and you can't resist roasted squash or pumpkin pie, especially in the fall, these are the plants for you.